The Lord of the Rings. Book 1. Chapter 12. Flight to the Ford. Whilst Frodo came to himself, he become nonetheless clutching the ring desperately. He become lying via the re, which changed into now piled excessive and burning brightly. His three companions had been bending over him. What has passed off in which is the Pale King? He asked wildly. They were too delighted to hear him communicate to answer for a while, nor did they understand his question. At period he collected from Sam that they'd seen not anything but the vague shadowy shapes coming in the direction of them. Suddenly to his horror Sam determined that his grasp had vanished, and at that moment a black shadow rushed beyond him, and he fell. He heard Frodo's voice, but it regarded to come from a awesome distance, or from below the earth, crying out odd phrases. They noticed nothing more, until they stumbled over the body of Frodo, lying as if dead, face downwards on the grass along with his sword beneath him. Strider ordered them to pick him up and lay him near the re, and then he disappeared. That changed into now an amazing while in the past. Sam, it appears, that evidently changed into starting to have doubts again about Strider. However, whilst they have been speak me he again, acting suddenly out of the shadows. They started, and Sam drew his sword and stood over Frodo. However, Strider knelt down rapidly at his facet. I'm now not a black rider, Sam, he said lightly, nor in league with them. I've been seeking to find out something of their movements, however I've determined nothing. I can't suppose why they've gone and do not attack once more. But there is no feeling in their presence everywhere at hand. When he heard what Frodo had to inform, he became complete of subject, and shook his head and sighed. Then he ordered Pippin and Merry to warmness as much water as they might of their small kettles, and to bathe the wound with it. Hold the re going nicely, and keep Frodo warm, he said. Then he got up and walked away, and referred to Sam to him. I think I recognize matters better now, he stated in a low voice. There appear simplest to worthy of the enemy. Why they had been not all right here, I don't recognize, but I don't think they expected to be resisted. They have got drawn off in the interim. However, no longer a ways, I worry. They will come once more another night time, if we cannot get away. They are best ready, due to the fact they think that their reason is nearly finished, and that the hoop cannot why a good deal further. I worry, Sam, that they trust your grasp has a deadly wound on the way to subdue him to their will. We shall see. Sam, filled with tears. Don't be melancholy, stated Strider. You must consider me now. Your Frodo is manufactured from sterner stuff than I had guessed, although Gandalf hinted that it would prove so. He isn't always slain, and I think he will resist the evil power of the wound longer than his enemies anticipate. I can do all I will to assist and heal him. Guard him properly, while I am away. He moved quickly off and disappeared again into the darkness. Frodo dozed, even though the pain of his wound turned into slowly developing, and a deadly sit-back became spreading from his shoulder to his arm and side. His pals watched over him, warming him and bathing his wound. The night time handed slowly and wearily. Sunrise changed into growing in the sky, and the dell was ling with grey light, whilst Strider at remaining returned. Look! He cried, and stooping he lifted from the floor a black cloak that had lain there hidden via the darkness. A foot above the decrease hem there has been a curb. This become the stroke of Frodo's sword, he said. The handiest hurt that it did to his enemy, I fear, for it's far unhurt, but all blades perish that pierce that dreadful king, greater lethal to him changed into the call of Elbereth. And more lethal to Frodo turned into this. He stooped again and lifted up an extended skinny knife. There has been a chilly gleam in it. As Strider raised it, they noticed that close to the end its edge became notched and the factor was damaged off. But even as he held it up within the developing mild, they gazed in astonishment, for the blade seemed to soften, and vanished like a smoke in the air, leaving only the hilt in Strider's hand. Unluckily, he cried, it turned into this accursed knife that gave the wound. Few now have the talent in recuperation to match such evil weapons. But I will do what I can. He sat down at the floor, and taking the dagger hilt laid it on his knees, and he sang over it a slow track in a ordinary tongue. Then, setting it apart, he grew to become to Frodo and in a smooth tone spoke words the others couldn't seize. From the pouch at his belt he drew out the lengthy leaves of a plant. These leaves, he stated, I have walked a long way to Nd, for this plant does not develop within the bare hills, however within the thickets away south of the street I found it within the dark with the aid of the scent of its leaves. He crushed a leaf in his engers, and it gave out a sweet and smelly perfume. It is lucky that I could Nd it, for it's far a restoration plant that the guys of the West delivered to Center Earth. Athlas they named it, and it grows now moderately and handiest close to locations in which they dwelt or camped of old, and it isn't always recognized within the north, besides to a number of those who wander in the wild. It has exceptional virtues, but over this type of wound, as this its restoration powers may be small, he threw the leaves into boiling water and bathed Frodo's shoulder. The fragrance of the steam become fresh, and those that were unhurt felt their minds calmed and cleared. The herb had also a few electricity over the wound, for Frodo felt the pain and additionally the experience of frozen cold lessen in his facet, but the existence did no longer return to his arm, and he could not increase or use his hand. He bitterly regretted his foolishness, and reproached himself for weak point of will, for he now perceived that during placing at the ring he obeyed not his personal preference, however the commanding wish of his enemies. He questioned if he would continue to be maimed for life, and how they would now control to preserve their journey. He felt too weak to stand. The others have been discussing this very question. They determined to depart Weathertop as quickly as possible. I suppose now, stated Strider, that the enemy has been watching this location for some days. If Gandalf ever came here, then he ought to have been forced to trip away, and he's going to not return. Anyways, we are in excellent peril right here. After dark, for the reason that assault of ultimate night time, and we will hardly ever meet extra threat wherever we move. As soon because the daytime changed into complete, they'd some hurried meals and packed. It become impossible for Frodo to walk, so they divided they more a part of their baggage, a number of the four of them, and positioned Frodo on the horse. Within the previous few days the negative beast had advanced wonderfully, it already seemed fatter and more potent, and had started to expose an affection for its new masters, in particular for Sam Invoice Fernie's remedy should were very difficult for the adventure in the wild to seem a lot higher than its former existence. They began off in a southerly direction. This would imply crossing the road, but it become the fastest manner to greater wooded USA. And they needed gas, for Strider said that Frodo need to be saved heat, particularly at night time, while might be some safety for all of them. It became additionally his plan to shorten their adventure by means of cutting across any other top-notch loop of the street, east past Weathertop. It changed its direction and took a huge bend northwards. They made their way slowly and cautiously round the southwestern slopes of the hill, and got here in a touch even as to the brink of the street. There has been no signal of the riders. But while they were hurrying across, they heard a ways away cries, a chilly voice calling, and a cold voice answering. Trembling they sprang ahead, and made for the thickets that lay beforehand. The land before them sloped away southwards, however it became wild and pathless, timber and stunted trees grew in dense patches with huge barren spaces in among. They grass become scanty, coarse, and grey, and the leaves within the thickets had been diminished and falling. It was a cheerless land, and their adventure became sluggish and gloomy. They spoke little as they trudged along. Frodo's heart changed into grieved as he watched them strolling beside him with their heads down, and their backs bowed under their burdens. Even Strider regarded tired and heavy-hearted. Earlier than the rst day's march become over, Frodo's pain started out to grow once more, but he did now not speak of it for a long time. 4 days surpassed, without the ground or the scene changing a great deal. Besides that, behind them Weathertop slowly sank, and before them the remote mountains loomed a bit nearer. But seeing that some distance cry that they had visible and heard no sign that the enemy had marked their eye or accompanied them, they dreaded the darkish hours, and stored watch in pairs by way of night, looking ahead to at any time to see black shapes stalking in the grey night time, dimly lit through the cloud-veiled moon. However they saw nothing, and heard no sound but the sigh of withered leaves and grass. Not once did they sense the experience of gift evil that had assailed them earlier than the attack inside the dell. It appeared an excessive amount of to hope that the riders had already misplaced their path again. Possibly they have been ready to make some ambush in a slender location on the end of the FTH day. The ground started all over again to upward thrust slowly out of the wide shallow valley into which that they had descended. Strider now grew to become their route once more northeastwards, and at the 6th day they reached the pinnacle of a long slow climbing slope, and noticed some distance beforehand a huddle of wooded hills. Away beneath them they might see the street sweeping round the foot of the hills, and to their proper a grey river gleamed light in the skinny sunshine. Within the distance they glimpsed but any other river in a stony valley half veiled in mist. "I am afraid we have to return to the street right here for some time," stated Strider. "We've now come to the river Horwell, that the elves name Mythithel. It owes down out of the Etten Moors, the Troll Fells, north of Rivendell, and joins the Loud Water away within the south. A few name it the Grioad after that. It's miles a notable water earlier than it nds the sea. There is no manner over it underneath its sources within the Etten Moors, besides by using the last bridge on which the street crosses." "What's that other river we can see a ways away there?" requested Mary. "This is Loud Water, the Bruinen of Rivendell," spoke back Strider. "The road runs alongside the threshold of the hills for plenty miles from the bridge to the Ford of Bruinen. But I have no longer but concept how we shall cross that water. One river at a time. We will be lucky, indeed, if we do not end the remaining bridge held in opposition to us." Next day, early inside the morning, they came down once more to the borders of the road. Sam and Strider went forward, however they determined. No sign of any travellers or riders. Right here below the shadow of the hills there had been some rain. Strider judged that it had fallen days earlier then, and had washed away all footprints. No horseman had given that then, as a long way as he could see. They hurried in conjunction with all the speed they may make, and after a mile or two they noticed the remaining bridge ahead, at the bottom of a quick steep slope. They dreaded to peer blackguards waiting there, however they saw none. Strider made them take cowl in a thicket on the side of the street, whilst he went forward to explore. Earlier than lengthy he got here hurrying again. I will see no sign of the enemy, he stated, and I'm wondering very plenty what that means. However, I have discovered something very unusual. He held out his hand, and confirmed a unmarried faded inexperienced jewel. I found it inside the dust in the center of the bridge, he stated. It is a barrel, an elf stone. Whether it was set there, or allow fall by way of threat, I can't say, but it brings hope to me. I'm able to take it as a sign that we might also pass the bridge, but past that I dare now not maintain to the road. Without some clearer token, without delay they went on again. They crossed the bridge in protection, hearing no sound but the water swirling in opposition to its three fantastic arches. A mile similarly on they came to a narrow ravine that led away northwards via the steep lands on the left of the street. Here Strider grew to become apart, and soon they were lost in a sombre country of darkish bushes winding a number of the feet of sullen hills. The hobbits had been satisfied to go away the cheerless lands and the perilous road in the back of them. However, this new USA appeared threatening and unfriendly. As they went ahead, the hills about them regularly rose. Right here and there upon heights and ridges they caught glimpses of ancient partitions of stone, and the ruins of towers. They'd an ominous appearance. Frodo, who was not walking, had time to gaze in advance and to suppose. He recalled Bilbo's account of his journey and the threatening towers on the hills north of the road, inside the USA near the Trolls' timber where his extreme journey had passed off. Frodo guessed that they had been now within the equal region, and puzzled if by using chance they would pass near the spot. Who lives in this land, he asked. And who constructed those towers? Is that this troll United States? No, said Strider. Trolls do not build. No person lives on this land. Guys once dwelt here, ages in the past, but none stay now. They have become an evil human beings, as legends inform, for they fell under the shadow of Angmar. However, all have been destroyed in the war that added the North Kingdom to its end. But that is now so long ago that the hills have forgotten them, though a shadow nevertheless lies on the land. Where did you analyze such memories, if all the land is empty and forgetful? Requested Peregrine. The birds and beasts do now not inform memories of that kind. The heirs of Elendil bear in mind all matters beyond, stated Strider, and plenty of more things than I'm able to inform are remembered in Rivendell. Have you ever often been to Rivendell? Said Frodo. I've, stated Strider. I dwelt there once, and still I return while I may. Additionally, there my heart is. However, it is not my fate to sit down in peace, even inside the truthful house of Elrond. The hills now started out to shut them in. The street at the back of hung on its way to the river Bruinen, but both had been now hidden from view. The guests came into an extended valley, slender, deeply cloven, darkish, and silent. Trees with old and twisted roots hung over cliffs, and piled up behind into mounting slopes of pine wood. The hobbits grew very weary. They superior slowly, for they had to pick out their way through a pathless sussave, weighted down by using fallen timber and tumbled rocks. As long as they might they averted hiking. For Frodo's sake, and as it was in fact difficult to enter any manner up out of the narrow dales. They had been days on this United States of America. When the climate grew to become wet, the wind commenced to blow step by step out of the west and pour the water of the distant seas at the dark heads of the hills in any drenching rain. Through nightfall they were all soaked, and their camp turned into cheerless, for they couldn't get any re to burn. Day after day the hills rose nevertheless higher and steeper before them, and they had been forced to turn away northwards out of their path. Strider seemed to be getting disturbing. They were almost 10 days out from Weathertop, and their inventory of provisions was beginning to run low. It went on raining. That night they camped on a stony shelf with a rock wall behind them, wherein there has been a shallow cave, a mere scoop in the cliff. Frodo became stressed. The cold and wet had made his wound more painful than ever, and the pain and feel of lethal relax took away all sleep. He lay tossing and turning and listening fearfully to the stealthy night noises, wind and chinks of rock, water dripping, a crack, the unexpected rattling fall of a loosened stone. He felt that black shapes have been advancing to smother him. However, while he sat up he noticed nothing but the return of Strider sitting hunched up, smoking his pipe, and looking. He lay down again and handed into an uneasy dream, in which he walked at the grass in his lawn inside the shire. However, it regarded faint and dim, much less clean than the tall black shadows that stood searching over the hedge. Within the morning he woke to endy that the rain had stopped. The clouds have been none the less thick, however they were breaking, and pale strips of blue seemed among them. The wind become transferring once more. They did not begin early. Straight away after their cold and comfortless breakfast, Strider went off by myself, telling the others to remain under the safe haven of the cliff, until he got here again. He turned into going to climb up, if he may want to, and get a take a look at the lie of the land. While he turned into no longer reassuring. We've got come to some distance to the north, he said, and we must endy a few manner to turn lower back southwards again. If we hold on as we're going we will stand up into the Edendales far north of Rivendell. This is Troll USA, and little regarded to me. We should perhaps J.R.R manner through and come spherical to Rivendell from the north, but it might take too long, for I do not understand the manner, and our food would now not closing. So some way or different we ought to endy the Ford of Bruinen. The relaxation of that day they spent scrambling over rocky floor. They determined a passage among two hills that led them into a valley. Going for walks southeast, the path that they wanted to take, but toward the quit of the day they located their street once more barred via a ridge of high land. Its darkish area towards the sky was damaged into many bare points like tooth of a blunted saw. They'd a desire among going returned or hiking over it. They decided to strive the climb, however it proved very difficult. Earlier than long Frodo become obliged to dismount and battle alongside on foot. Even so that they frequently despaired of having their pony up, or certainly of ending a course for themselves, confused as they had been. The light turned into nearly gone, and they had been all exhausted, whilst at ultimate they reached the top. They'd climbed directly to a narrow saddle between better points, and the land fell steeply away again, only a brief distance in advance. Frodo threw himself down, and lay at the floor, shivering. His left arm was dead, and his facet and shoulder felt as if icy claws were laid upon them. The bushes and rocks about him appeared shadowy and dim. "We cannot cross any further," stated Merry to Strider. "I'm afraid this has been an excessive amount for Frodo. I am dreadfully nerve-wracking approximately him. What are we to do? Do you think they may be capable of cure him in Rivendell, if we ever get there?" "We shall see," replied Strider. "There's nothing greater that I can do inside the desolate tract, and it is chiefly because of his wound that I'm so demanding to press on, but I agree that we are able to go no similarly tonight." "What's the matter with my grasp?" asked Sam in a low voice, looking appealingly at Strider. His wound became small, and its miles already closed. There's not anything to be seen, however, a chilly white mark on his shoulder. "Frodo has been touched by means of the weapons of the enemy," said Strider, "and there may be some poison or evil at paintings this is past my skill to drive out, but do no longer surrender wish, Sam." Night turned into bloodless up at the excessive ridge. They lit a small redown under the gnarled roots of an vintage pine, that hung over a shallow pit. It regarded as if stone had once been quarried there. They sat huddled collectively. The wind blew relaxed through the pass, and they heard the tree-tops decrease down, moaning and sighing. Frodo lay half of in a dream, imagining that infinite darkish wings have been sweeping by, using above him, and that at the wings rode pursuers that sought him in all the hollows of the hills. The morning dawned vivid and fair, the air turned into clean, and the mild light and clear in a rain-washed sky. Their hearts had been recommended, but they longed for the sun to warm their cold stiff limbs. As soon as it was mild, Strider took Merry with him and went to survey the United States of America from the peak to the east of the skip. The sun had risen and became shining brightly when he again with more comforting information. They have been now going greater or much less in the proper path. If they went on, down the in addition facet of the ridge, they might have the mountains on their left. A few way ahead Strider had stuck a glimpse of the loud water once more, and he knew that, though it became hidden from view, the road to the ford became not a long way from the river, and lay on the aspect nearest to them. "We need to make for the road again," he stated. "We cannot wish to empty a path through these hills. Anything danger may additionally beset it. The avenue is our best manner to the ford." As quickly as that they had eaten they set out again. They climbed slowly down the southern facet of the ridge, but the way turned into a lot less difficult than they'd expected, for the slope was a ways less steep in this aspect, and before lengthy Frodo turned into able to journey once more. Bill Ferny's bad old pony turned into growing in unexpected skills for picking out a direction, and for sparing its rider as many jolts as viable. The spirits of the birthday celebration rose once more. Even Frodo felt higher inside the morning mild, but every so often a mist appeared to obscure his sight, and he passed his fingers over his eyes. Pippin was a little in advance of the others. Suddenly he turned spherical and called to them. "There may be a path here," he cried. Once they got here up with him, they noticed that he had made no mistake. There were without a doubt the beginnings of a course, that climbed with many windings out of the woods below and dwindled away on the hilltop at the back of. In places it became now faint and overgrown, or choked with fallen stones and timber. However, at one time it regarded to have been an awful lot used. It changed into a course made by using sturdy palms and heavy foot here and there. Antique bushes were reduced or damaged down, and huge rocks cloven or heaved aside to make a way. They observed the track for some even as, for it supplied a lot the easiest manner down. However, they went cautiously, and their anxiety accelerated as they got here into the darkish woods, and the root grew plainer and broader. All at once popping out of a belt of arbushes it ran steeply down a slope, and grew to become sharply to the left round the corner of a rocky shoulder of the hill. When they got here to the corner they looked round and noticed that the direction ran on over a degree strip beneath the face of a low cliff overhung with trees. Within the stony wall there has been a door, striking crookedly ajar upon one tremendous hinge. Outdoor the door all of them halted. There was a cave or rock chamber. In the back of, however inside the gloom inner nothing can be visible. Strider, Sam, and Mary pushing with all their electricity managed to open the door a little wider, after which Strider and Mary went in. They did not cross far, for on the ore lay many old bones, and nothing else became to be seen close to the entrance besides a few tremendous empty jars and damaged pots. In reality this is a troll hollow, if ever there was one, stated Pippin. Pop out, you, and allow us to escape. Now we realize who made the course and we had higher get off it brief. There's no need, I assume, said Strider, popping out. It is truly a troll hole, but it seems to were long forsaken. I don't assume. We won't be afraid. However, allow us to go on down warily, and we shall see. The course went on once more from the door, and turning to the proper once more across the level area plunged down a thick wooded slope. Pippin, no longer liking to expose Strider that he become none the less afraid, went on beforehand with Mary. Sam and Strider got here in the back of, one on every facet of Frodo's pony, for the direction turned into now large enough for 4 or v hobbits to stroll abreast. However, they had not long gone very some distance before Pippin came going for walks back, observed via Mary. They both seemed tarried. There are trolls, Pippin panted. Down in a clearing in the woods no longer a long way below. We were given a sight of them through the tree trunks. They are very big. We are able to come and look at them, stated Strider, choosing up a stick. Frodo said nothing, however Sam looked scared. The solar became now excessive, and it shone down via the half-stripped branches of the timber, and lit the clearing with vivid patches of mild. They halted all at once on the edge, and peered through the tree trunks, keeping their breath. There stood the trolls, 3 massive trolls. One turned into stooping, and the alternative 2 stood staring at him. Strider walked forward unconcernedly. Rise up, antique stone, he stated, and broke his stick upon the stooping troll. Not anything befell. There has been a gasp of astonishment from the hobbits, after which even Frodo laughed. Well, he said, we are forgetting our family records. These should be the very 3 that had been caught via Gandalf, quarrelling over the proper way to cook 13 dwarves and 1 hobbit. I had no concept we were anywhere close to the area, said Pippin. He knew the story nicely. Bilbo and Frodo had told it frequently, however as a count number of truth he had never extra than half believed it. Even now he looked at the stone trolls with suspicion, thinking if some magic might not unexpectedly deliver them to life once more. You're forgetting now not only your family records, but all you ever knew about trolls, stated Strider. It is wide daytime with a bright sun, and yet you come back trying to scare me with a tale of stay trolls awaiting us on this glade. Anyways, you may have noticed that one among them has an old bird's nest behind his ear that could be a maximum unusual ornament for a stay troll. All of them laughed. Frodo felt his spirits reviving, the reminder of Bilbo's RST a success journey become hardening. The sun, 2, became heat and comforting, and the mist earlier than his eyes seemed to be lifting a little. They rested for some time in the glade, and took their midday meal proper under the shadow of the troll's huge legs. "Gain tea, someone give us a bit of a tune, while the solar is excessive," stated Mary, when they had nished. "We haven't had a track or a tale for days. Now, not considering the fact that Weathertop," stated Frodo. The others checked out him. "Don't worry, approximately me," he introduced. "I feel a lot higher, however I don't think I ought to sing. Possibly Sam may want to dig something out of his reminiscence." "Come on, Sam," said Mary. "There's extra saved in your head than you let on about." "I don't know approximately that," stated Sam. "However, how might this fit it and what I call proper poetry, if you apprehend me, simply a piece of nonsense, but those antique photos here introduced it to my thoughts." Standing up, with his hands in the back of his lower back, as if he changed into at school, he commenced to sing to an old music. "Troll sat by myself on his seat of stone, and munched and mumbled a naked old bone, for plenty a 12 months he had gnawed it near, for meat was tough to return by way of accomplished by way of gum by. In a cave within the hills he dwelt on my own, and meat was tough to return by." Up came Tom along with his huge boots on. Stated he to Troll, "Pray, what's yon, for it looks like the shin o' my nuncle Tim, as should be a lion in graveyard." "Caveyard. Paveyard. This many a year has Tim been long gone, and I notion he were lion in graveyard." "My lad," stated Troll, "this bone I stole, but what be bones that lie in a hole thine uncle turned into dead as a lump o' lead, afore I discovered his shin bone." "Tin bone. Thin bone. He can spare a share for a terrible old troll, for he don't need his shin bone," said Tom. "I don't see why the likes o' thee without axe and go away need to go makin' loose with the shank or the shin o' my father's relations, so hand the antique bone over." "Rover. Trover. Even though useless he be, it belongs to he, so hand the old bone over." "For a couple o' pins," says Troll, and grins, "I'll eat thee too, and gnaw thy shins a bit o' fresh meat will move down sweet. I'll try my enamel on thee now. He now. See now. I'm worn out o' gnawing vintage bones and skins, I've a thoughts to dine on thee now." However, just as he notioned his dinner became stuck, he found his palms had hold of naught. Before he ought to thoughts, Tom slipped at the back of and gave him the boot to larn him. Warn him. Darn him. A bump o' the boot at the seat, Tom notion, would be the manner to larn him. But harder than stone is the esh and bone of a troll that sits within the hills by myself. As nicely set your boot to the mountain's root, for the seat of a troll don't feel it. Peel it. Heel it. Old Troll laughed, while he heard Tom groan, and he knew his foot should experience it. Tom's leg is game, for the reason that domestic he came, and his bootless foot is lasting lame, but Troll don't care, and he's nonetheless there. With the bone he boned from its owner. Donor. Boner. Troll's old seat is still the identical, and the bone he boned from its proprietor. "Well, that's a caution to us all," laughed Mary. "It's far as well you used a stick, and no longer your hand, Strider." "Wherein did you come with the aid of that?" Sam requested Pippin. "I've by no means heard the one's phrases earlier then." Sam muttered something inaudible. "It's out of his personal head, of course," said Frodo. "I'm studying lots approximately Sam Gamgee in this adventure. First he was a conspirator, now he's a jester. He'll end up by becoming a wizard or a warrior." I am hoping not, said Sam. I don't need to be neither. Inside the afternoon they went on down the woods. They had been in all likelihood following the very track that Gandalf, Bilbo, and the dwarves had used a few years earlier then. After some miles they came out on the pinnacle of a high bank above the road. At this factor the road had left the Horwell a ways in the back of its slender valley, and now clung near the toes of the hills, rolling and winding eastward amongst woods and heather-covered slopes towards the ford and the mountains. No longer. A long way down the bank Strider pointed out a stone inside the grass. On it, kind of reduced and now much weathered, should nevertheless be visible dwarf runes and secret marks. There, said Mary. That have to be the stone that marked the region where the troll's gold turned into hidden. How lots is left of Bilbo's percentage, I ponder, Frodo. Frodo looked at the stone, and wanted that Bilbo had delivered home no treasure greater perilous, nor much less clean to element with. None at all, he said. Bilbo gave it all away. He advised me he did not experience it. Became honestly his, as it came from robbers. The road lay quiet underneath the long shadows of early night. There become no signal of every other travellers to be visible. As there has been now no other possible course for them to take, they climbed down the bank, and turning left went off as rapid as they might. Soon a shoulder of the hills cut off the light of the fast westering Sunday. A chilly wind owed down to meet them from the mountains ahead. They had been beginning to look out for a place off the road, wherein they might camp for the night time, after they heard a ballad that introduced sudden fear again into their hearts, the noise of hoofs behind them. They looked again, but they couldn't see some distance due to the various windings and rollings of the road. As fast as they may they scrambled off the crushed manor and up into the deep heather and bilberry brushwood on the slopes above, until they got here to a small patch of thick-growing hazels. As they peered out from many of the trees, they may see the street, faint and grey within the failing mild, a few 30 toes beneath them. The sound of hoofs drew nearer. They were going fast, with a mild clippity-clippity-clip. Then faintly, as though it changed into blown away from them via the breeze, they appeared to catch a dim ringing, as of small bells tinkling. That does not sound like a Black Rider's horse, stated Frodo, listening intently. The other hobbits agreed hopefully that it did now not, however they all remained full of suspicion. They were in worry of pursuit, for see you later that any sound from behind regarded ominous and unfriendly. However, Strider was now leaning ahead, stooped to the ground, with a hand to his ear, and a look of pleasure on his face. The mild dwindled, and the leaves at the trees rustled softly. Clearer and closer now the bells jingled, and clippity-clip came the short trotting feet. Suddenly into view underneath came a white horse, sparkling inside the shadows, running unexpectedly. Inside the nightfall its headstall ickered and dashed, as if it had been studded with gemstones like residing stars. The rider's cloak streamed behind him, and his hood turned into throne returned, his golden hair owed shimmering inside the wind of his pace. To Frodo it regarded that a white light changed into shining through the shape and raiment of the rider, as if through a skinny veil. Strider sprang from hiding and dashed down towards the road, leaping with a cry through the heather, but even before he had moved or called, the rider had reined in his horse and halted, searching up towards the thicket in which they stood. When he noticed Strider, he dismounted and ran to satisfy him, calling out, "Aina vidu I do naden. May. Govanen." His speech and clean ringing voice left no question of their hearts. The rider changed into of the elven people. No others that dwelt in the huge world had voices so truthful to pay attention. But there appeared to be a notice of haste or worry in his name, and that they noticed that he changed into now speaking speedy and urgently to Strider. Quickly Strider beckoned to them, and the hobbits left the timber and moved quickly down to the road. That is Glorndal, who dwells in the residence of Elrond, stated Strider. Hail, and properly met at final, said the elf lord to Frodo. I was sent from Rivendell to search for you. We feared which you have been in threat upon the road. Then Gandalf has reached Rivendell, cried Frodo joyfully. No. He had no longer after I departed, but that turned into 9 days ago, answered Glorndal. Elrond received news that afflicted him. A few of my kindred, visiting in your land beyond the Barandwin, learned that things had been amiss, and dispatched messages as hastily as they should. They stated that the 9 were overseas, and which you have been astray, bearing a wonderful burden without steering, for Gandalf had not back. There are few even in Rivendell that could journey overtly against the 9, however inclusive of there have been, Elrond dispatched out north, west, and south. It changed into thought which you would possibly flip a ways aside to keep away from pursuit, and come to be lost in the barren region. It become my lot to take the street, and that I got here to the bridge of Mithidal, and left a token there, nigh on 7 days in the past. 3 of the servants of Sauron were upon the bridge, but they withdrew and I pursued them westward. I got here additionally upon others, however they became away southward. Given that then I have searched for your path. 2 days in the past I found it, and observed it over the bridge, and these days I marked where you descended from the hills again. But come. There isn't any time for in addition information. Because you are right here we ought to risk the peril of the road and move. There are VE behind us, and when they ND your trail upon the street they will journey after us like the wind. And they may be now not all. Where the opposite four can be, I do now not know. I fear that we might also ND the ford is already held towards us. Even as Glorndal turned into speaking the shades of night deepened. Frodo felt a top-notch weariness come over him. Ever for the reason that Solar began to sink the mist earlier than his eyes had darkened, and he felt that a shadow turned into coming between him and the faces of his pals. Now pain assailed him, and he felt bloodless. He swayed, clutching at Sam's arm. My grasp is unwell and wounded, said Sam angrily. He can't move on driving after dusk. He needs relaxation. Glorndal caught Frodo as he sank to the ground, and taking him lightly in his fingers he appeared in his face with grave anxiety. Bree Strider instructed of the attack on their camp underneath Weathertop, and of the deadly knife. He drew out the hilt, which he had stored, and acceded it to the elf. Glorndal shuddered as he took it, but he appeared closely at it. There are evil matters written in this hilt, he stated, though maybe your eyes cannot see them. Preserve it, Aragorn, until we reach the house of Elrond, but be cautious, and handle it as low as you could. Alas, the wounds of this weapon are beyond my talent to heal. I can do what I can, however all the greater do I urge you presently to go on without rest. He searched the wound on Frodo's shoulder together with his engers, and the Brandywine River. His face grew graver, as if what he discovered disquieted him. However Frodo felt the relax reduce in his facet and arm, a bit warmth crept down from his shoulder to his hand, and the pain grew simpler. The dusk of evening regarded to grow lighter approximately him, as if a cloud have been withdrawn. He noticed his buddies' faces more in reality again, and a degree of latest desire and energy again. "You shall trip my horse," said Glorndal. "I will shorten the stirrups up to the saddle skirts, and also you should sit down as tight as you may. However, you need no longer worry, my horse will now not allow any rider fall that I command him to bear. His pace is light and easy, and if hazard presses too near, he will undergo you away with a velocity that even the black steeds of the enemy can't rival." "No, he'll no longer," stated Frodo. "I shall now not journey him, if I'm to be carried off to Rivendell or anywhere else, leaving my pals at the back of in risk." Glorndal smiled. "I doubt very a lot," he said, "if your pals might be in danger if you have been no longer with them. The pursuit would follow you and depart us in peace, I think. It is you, Frodo, and that which you undergo that brings us all in peril." To that Frodo had no solution, and he became persuaded to mount Glorndal's white horse. The horse become encumbered rather with a first-rate part of the other's burdens, so they now marched lighter, and for a time made precise velocity, but the hobbits started to end it hard to preserve up with the swift tireless feet of the elf. On he led them, into the mouth of darkness, and still on underneath the deep clouded night time. There was neither superstar nor moon. Now not until the grey of sunrise did he allow them to halt. Pippin, Merry, and Sam were by that point nearly asleep on their stumbling legs, or even Strider regarded by using the sag of his shoulders to be weary. Frodo sat upon the pony in a darkish dream. They cast themselves down inside the heather some yards from the street facet, and fell asleep without delay. They regarded hardly ever to have closed their eyes when Glorndal, who had set himself to watch even as they slept, awoke them once more. The sun had now climbed a long way into the morning, and the clouds and mists of the night were long past. "Drink this," stated Glorndal to them, pouring for every in turn a little liquor from his silver-studded ask of leather-based. It changed into clear as spring water and had no flavor, and it did not sense either cool or warm in the mouth, but electricity and vigor regarded to owe into all their limbs as they drank it. Eaten after that draught the stale bread and dried fruit which turned into now all that they had left seemed to satisfy their hunger better than many an excellent breakfast in the Shire had done. That they had rested as a substitute less than hours once they took to the road again. Glorndal still advised them on, and best allowed short halts throughout the day's march. On this manner they covered almost 20 miles earlier than nightfall, and got here to some extent wherein the street bent proper and ran down toward the lowest of the valley, now making straight for the Bruinen. Up to now there were no sign or sound of pursuit that the hobbits could see or listen, but frequently Glorndal would halt and listen for a second, in the event that they lagged at the back of, and a glance of hysteria clouded his face. A few times he spoke to Strider within the elf tongue. However nerve-wracking their courses is probably, it was plain that the hobbits should move no similarly that night. They had been stumbling along, dizzy with weariness, and not able to think of whatever however their feet and legs. Frodo's pain had redoubled, and in the course of the day things approximately him faded to shadows of ghostly grey. He almost welcomed the approaching of night time, for then the sector appeared less pale and empty. The hobbits have been still weary, once they set out once more early subsequent morning. There have been many miles but to go between them and the ford, and that they hobbled ahead on the great tempo they could manipulate. "Our peril can be greatest simply ere we attain the river," said Glorndal, "for my coronary heart warns me that the pursuit is now speedy at the back of us, and different danger may be waiting through the ford." The street was nevertheless jogging gradually downhill, and there has been now in places a whole lot grass at both aspect, in which the hobbits walked when they could. To ease their worn-out feet in the past dew afternoon they came to an area where the street went unexpectedly beneath the darkish shadow of tall pine timber, after which plunged right into a deep reducing with steep moist walls of crimson stone. Echoes ran alongside as they moved quickly forward, and there appeared to be a sound of many footfalls following their very own. All at once, as though via a gate of mild, the road ran out again from the cease of the tunnel into the open. There at the bottom of a pointy incline they saw earlier than them and extended at mile, and past that the Ford of Rivendell. On the similarly aspect was a steep brown bank, threaded by means of a winding course, and at the back of that the tall mountains climbed, shoulder above shoulder, and peak past peak, into the fading sky. There has been none the less an echo as of following foot within the cutting in the back of them, a rushing noise as though a wind had been rising and pouring through the branches of the pines. One moment Glorndal grew to become and listened, then he sprang ahead with a noisy cry. "Fly!" he referred to as "Fly! The enemy is upon us!" The white horse leaped forward. The hobbits ran down the slope. Glorndal and Strider observed as rear guard. They were simplest 1-2 way throughout the whilst there has been a noise of horses galloping. Out of the gate within the timber that they had simply left rode a black rider. He reined his horse in, and halted, swaying in his saddle. Any other accompanied him, after which every other, however extra. "Ride ahead, ride!" cried Glorndal to Frodo. He did now not obey at once, for a ordinary reluctance seized him. Checking the pony to a stroll, he grew to become and regarded again. The riders seemed to sit upon their awesome steeds like threatening statues upon a hill, darkish and stable, while all the woods and land approximately them receded, as though into a mist. Unexpectedly he knew in his coronary heart that they had been silently commanding him to attend. Then right away worry and hatred wakened in him. His hand left the bridle and gripped the hilt of his sword, and with a pink ash he drew it. Trip on!" cried Glorndal, and then loud and clear he referred to as to the pony inside the elf tongue, "Norolim, Norolim, Osvalith." Without delay the white horse sprang away and sped like the wind alongside the ultimate lap of the street. On the identical second the black horses leaped down the hill in pursuit, and from the riders got here a horrible cry, inclusive of Frodo had hurdling the woods with horror within the east farthing a long way away. It was responded, and to the dismay of Frodo and his buddies out from the bushes and rocks away on the left 4 other riders. Got here Ying. 2 rode toward Frodo, 2 galloped madly closer to the ford to reduce off his breakout. They seemed to him to run like the wind and to grow rapidly larger and darker, as their courses converged together with his. Frodo seemed again for a moment over his shoulder. He could no longer see his buddies. The riders in the back of had been falling back, even. Their excellent steeds were no match in velocity for the white elf horse of Glorndal. He seemed forward once more, and hope faded. There appeared no hazard of attaining the ford earlier than he turned in to reduce off by the others that had lain in ambush. He should see them honestly now, they appeared to have cast apart their hoods and black cloaks, and that they had been robed in white and grey. Swords were bare in their light palms, helms had been on their heads. Their bloodless eyes glittered, and they known as to him with fell voices. Worry now led all Frodo's thoughts. He thought now not of his sword. No cry got here from him. He shut his eyes and clung to the horse's mane. The wind whistled in his ears, and the bells upon the harness rang wild and shrill. A breath of deadly cold pierced him like a spear, as with a remaining spurt, like a ash of white the elf horse, dashing as if on wings, surpassed proper before the face of the most rider. Frodo heard the splash of water. It foamed approximately his foot. He felt the short heave and surge as the horse left the river and struggled up the stony course. He turned into mountain climbing the steep bank. He became across the ford. However, the pursuers were near at the back of. At the pinnacle of the bank the horse halted and became about neighing earnestly. There were 9 riders on the water's area under, and Frodo's spirit quailed earlier than the threat in their uplifted faces. He knew of nothing that might prevent them from crossing as without problems as he had done, and he felt that it became useless to try and escape over the lengthy uncertain route from the ford to the threshold of Rivendell, if once the riders crossed. In any case, he felt that he turned into commanded urgently to halt. Hatred once more stirred in him, but he had no longer the strength to refuse. All at once the most rider spurred his horse ahead. It checked on the water and reared up. With a great attempt Frodo sat upright and brandished his sword. "Move again!" he cried. "Go again to the land of Mordor, and comply with me no more." His voice sounded skinny and shrill in his own ears. The riders halted, but Frodo had not the energy of Bombadil. His enemies laughed at him with a harsh and chilling laughter. "Come again! Come back!" they referred to as. "To Mordor we will take you. Go lower back!" he whispered. "The hoop, the hoop!" they cried with deadly voices, and right away their chief urged his horse forward into the water, observed closely via others. "By means of Elbereth and Elutien the Truthful," said Frodo with a final effort, lifting up his sword, "you shall have neither the hoop nor me." Then the chief, who changed into now half across the ford, stood up, menacing in his stirrups, and raised up his hand. Frodo was troubled. Dumb. He felt his tongue cleave to his mouth, and his coronary heart laboring. His sword broke and fell out of his shaking hand. The elf horse reared and snorted. The foremost of the black horses had nearly set foot upon the shore. At that moment there came a roaring and a rushing, a noise of loud waters rolling many stones. Dimly Frodo saw the river below him upward push, and down along its route there came a plumed cavalry of waves. White seemed to Frodo to ichor on their crests, and he one too fancied that he saw amid the water white riders upon white horses with frothing manes. The 3 riders that had been nonetheless in the midst of the ford were beaten, they disappeared, buried suddenly beneath irritated foam. Those who have been at the back of drew back in dismay. Together with his last failing senses Frodo heard cries, and it appeared to him that he noticed, beyond the riders that hesitated at the shore, a shining gur of white mild, and at the back of it ran small shadowy forms, waving arms, that aired red in the grey mist that was falling over the arena. The black horses have been led with madness, and leaping ahead. In terror they bore their riders into the speeding wood. Their piercing cries had been drowned in the roaring of the river as it carried them away. Then Frodo felt himself falling, and the roaring and confusion appeared to upward thrust and engulf him collectively with his enemies. He heard and noticed no more.